Shabbat Shalom. To get all of the things that hook onto my ears set so that they're all working. Okay. So as Rabbi Danny and Rabbi Jordy told us, this Shabbat we read the very first story in the Torah, the story of creation. And we're taught that God worked on creating for 6 days and rested on the seventh, and that the work is unfinished. It's ongoing, and we are partners with God in this ongoing creation. So this is a story about the world we can create together. It's called The Magical Letter. There's something magical about a blank white piece of paper. Anything can happen on it, and that is exactly where this story begins, with a plain white page with absolutely nothing on it, until it met Natai. Natai was a boy who loved books and stories and fairy tales with no real ending. When his parents' voices fell silent at the end of bedtime stories, Natai's mind would float around and explore the endless possibilities of what could happen next. He was just learning to read and write. His letters were not often straight, and his words drifted above or below the lines in his notebook. But the few words he could write were enough to write a sentence or two. He practiced a lot, and soon his words were sliding off his pencil onto the pages of his notebook. And this is around the time that Natai and a beautiful blank piece of paper met. One evening at bedtime, Natai's mother was hugging him close and whispering words of comfort and love into his ears. Natai could tell that she was a little blue. And so when she had said goodnight and left his room, Natai went over to his desk and found this beautiful blank white piece of paper, full of possibility, with a pencil right next to it. Natai took the pencil between his fingers, and with an open heart, he let the pencil guide his hand. The letters became words, and the words became sentences, and soon enough, he had written a letter, his very first letter. He folded it and put it in an envelope, and quickly, like a superhero, without anyone seeing him, he left the letter on the counter in the kitchen for his mother to find. When Lily opened the envelope, her face became like rays of sunshine. She put the letter close to her heart so that the paper could feel its soft beating. She kissed the letter and placed it back on the counter. The next morning before heading to work, Lily placed the letter carefully in her bag. It was dark and lonely in there, and the letter hoped that she would find a reason to pull it out soon. The letter did not have to wait long, for on the bus, everyone could hear the voice of a grumpy man shouting on his phone. He didn't really care that he was making everyone else grumpy. He was grumpy, and he wanted everyone else to be grumpy. Well, Lily didn't take his grumpy ways too seriously. She figured he must be lonely. She wanted to say something to him, but she could not find the right words. They both got off the bus and started to walk in the same direction. He looked down and continued on his way. Suddenly, Lily pulled the letter from her bag and put it in the hands of the grumpy stranger. When the man opened the envelope, his grip softened. He looked around and he saw people. He saw light shining through the water fountain in the square and the unexpected rainbow that happened when you looked at it just the right way. He heard children laughing and he saw them running. He took a deep breath. He smiled like he had not smiled in a very long time. People even smiled back at him, and suddenly he wasn't grumpy anymore. He continued on his way, humming a little tune. On the next street, he saw an older man sitting on a bench all alone. He seemed quite gloomy, and the grumpy man, who wasn't grumpy anymore, put the letter into the wrinkled hand of the older man. The gloomy man opened the envelope, read the letter, and in a moment there was light in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. with a smile, "I think I should give this letter to my daughter. It's been way too long since we last talked." The old man stood up, his fingers curled around the letter. He said thank you again and started walking as fast as he could. He was on a mission. He kept going and going until he found her. Her head was slightly down. She was staring at the ground. He approached her and placed the letter gently into her hands. She wasn't sure what to do. "Please open it," he said. So she did, and as she read the letter, she felt love taking over her. "I really miss you," said the older man, and they hugged for a very long time. The letter was getting more and more crumpled, but it didn't care, because now it was with the young woman and she was happy. Soon, the letter learned that she was a teacher. Her classroom was bright and there were paper birds hanging from the ceiling, and everyone in her classroom was busy and chatty. Well, everyone except one child who stood alone, looking out the window. "Why are you over here?" she asked. "Well, I'm afraid they won't like me," the child said. The teacher tilted her head, puzzled. He was a new student, so she said, "Wait right here." She went to her bag and pulled out the letter, came back and handed him the crumpled envelope. He opened it, and although it was older and more wrinkled than the last time he saw it, Natai recognized the letters, words, and sentences that he had written. He smiled with his whole body. He put the letter in his pocket and knew that he had nothing to lose. He could make friends. He could change a world of hearts with the power of words on a blank white page. He could create the kind of world he wanted to live in. Shabbat Shalom.